the 5th chapter, 21st verse. And if you wish, you can follow along with this particular reading in the Bibles in front of you in your pews. There's an interesting literal variation that, literary, I should say, variation that Mark uses in this particular passage that I'll show you after we're done reading. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, that she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. May God bless the reading of this gospel. What Mark is using here is called a story inside of a story. We have the story of Jairus starting at verse 21 to verse 24. And then Jairus' story goes to the background. And the lady with the woman with the flow of the blood, her story comes to the forefront. And that goes from verses 25 to 34. That story is completed. And then Jairus' story picks back up again. That's called a story inside of a story, or in seminary terms, it's called an intercalation in seminary language. They call it intercalation because they charge you so much per hour that they can't just call it a story inside of a story. They've got to make that something. They're a little bit like attorneys that way, I think. So this is a story inside of the story having to do with Jairus. Now Jesus had crossed over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. He was just over the Decapolis. And if you remember there, he encountered the man Legion, or the man who had, I should say, Legion inside of him, the many demons. So he cast those out. Now he's back over in the Capernaum area. And the Capernaum area is probably where his home base was, where he taught from. Peter's mother-in-law was there. She had her house there. Peter knew the people well. So this is the home base for Jesus, and it's a well-known area for him. Jairus is seeking him out. And Jairus is a well-known name to the Jewish people. It goes back to Numbers in the Old Testament, where Jairus, the family named Jair, J-A-I-R, actually was one of the families that received the literal portion of the Promised Land. They received a portion of Canaan, the Promised Land is promised by God. This was given out by Moses. Moses, of course, was not able to go over to the Promised Land, but he was able to divvy out the land. So Jair is a well-known name. The second time it was mentioned is in the book of Esther. And Jair was the father of Mordecai. Mordecai happened to be the individual, the uncle of Esther, who raised Esther. And Esther was the person who, through God's help, through his sanction, in essence, saved the remnant of the Jewish people. So the Jairus name is very well known to everyone in that area throughout Judaism. Jairus was a synagogue ruler. And to understand the importance of this, he basically was the administrator, he was the manager, but not only that, some scholars say that he had the right, had the power to determine what was preached in that synagogue. In other words, he controlled the theological orthodoxy of the synagogue as a ruler. So that's important because you see, when Jairus is seeking out Jesus, he's risking everything. He's risking everything the world holds dear. Because at this point in time, if you'll remember, in the scribes from Jerusalem, just a chapter before, they had sought out Jesus and they were calling him Beelzebub. In other words, the ruler of the demons. And before that, the scribes and the Pharisees were actually accusing Jesus of pretty much the same, but they had accused him of doing miracles on the Sabbath, didn't believe in his miracles, and they were out to kill him. As it says in Mark, they were out to destroy him. So for Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, to seek out Jesus was an incredible thing, and it was an incredible act of faith. And not only does Jairus seek him out, as Mark tells it, and when he saw him, and when he saw Jesus, he fell, Jairus fell at Jesus' feet. So to set the stage for this, Jairus is in the crowd. The people are pressing in on him. Here we have most certainly people from his congregation. They know how much of a risk it is. They know how radical this Jesus is. And Jairus, the ruler of their synagogue, is falling down on his knees before Jesus. He's risking everything. But he's risking everything out of, number one, the desperation of his daughter. And as the greater risk, though, is he has great faith. The great faith takes away any risk that he has in his mind because he knows that Jesus can heal his daughter.